Welcome to a very special edition of Top of the Pod, because this time we're not looking at a top 10. We're looking at someone very special indeed, close to our own hearts, and current, at the time of this recording, Hall of Famer in the WWE Celebrity Hall of Fame. We're, of course, talking about Andy Kaufman, the man, the myth, the legend. We're going to get into a little bit about who Andy is, why is he going in the Wrestling Hall of Fame, and Man on the Moon, of course, probably the closest we get to a definitive biopic of the man himself. But of course, if we're going to do this, we need some special celebrity ourselves. And of course, because of that, we are joined by actor, comedian, wrestler in his own right, who better talk about Andy Kaufman than Luke Barry. Luke, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I had to jump on for this one. I'm always happy to gush about Andy Kaufman and the incredible, I suppose, what he's done for wrestling business and all the stuff that I've stole from him over the years as well.
I suppose jumping in on that, Luke, what makes Andy Kaufman such an interesting kind of persona that's lasted for as long as he has?
I think the interest for me and for anybody that you talked about it is that what he did was different even by today's standards. There's no like one thing he's known for. And on top of that, nobody knows what was real, what wasn't. You always hear conflicting stories of all these different versions of things that happened, and people come out and say, no, I knew what was happening there, or I didn't know what was happening there, but he knew what was happening there. And you see that in any documentary you see about him, any book you read about him, even if you look down to like the Jim and Andy documentary that came out recently. Jim Carrey seems to think that the Jerry Lawler stuff was real, but Jerry Lawler knows it wasn't, obviously. So it's very strange that when Jim Carrey is method acting, he's shouting at Jerry Lawler as if they're enemies, whereas they were actually friends. We don't know.
I have a lot of notes on that as well. Yeah,
it's an interesting point, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like, I think Andy Kaufman, for so many people, calling him even like the rebel comedian. You know, there's even debate: is he a comedian, or
he said he wasn't?
No. Exactly. Is he just a performance artist? Is he just an asshole?
His point was to confuse his audience more than anything else. And no matter what he was doing, whether he was on live television, whether he was doing his specials, whether he was involved in wrestling, his aim was to make people not understand what was happening. He used to do stand-up comedy, and if it was doing badly, he'd just go and read Charles Dickens for the rest of the show instead, just to annoy his audience.
Oh, well, I hope no one there had any great expectations.
Nice. I like that.
Good night, everybody.
That's Tom gone.
And we're back. Okay. Jer, what about your own thoughts on Andy Kaufman?
Well, I grew up in late 80s, early 90s watching reruns of Taxi, so that was my first introduction to him. And then when REM obviously released the song Man on the Moon, and it took me a while to realize it was actually about Andy Kaufman, because there was no internet when that song came out. We were still trying to figure out what it was about. So when they released the film, then it was like, oh yeah, no, you get it. Like, you watch the film back and you get obsessed with them. Then after the film, I'm a big sucker for biopics, big sucker for wrestling. So this was like the ultimate. And at the time when it first came out, I was a big Jim Carrey fan, because he was the hottest person in the 90s growing up. When you're a teenager, like, every film he was in, you just get hooked on it. So whenever this came out, it was like, yes, this is the dream. Like, wrestling, Andy Kaufman, Jim Carrey, like, what else do you need? So I just got obsessed with Andy Kaufman then. So I started going back over Taxi, and rewatching Taxi, and fucking learning more about REM. I used to love reading the side notes and stuff, and album covers and stuff, and finding out what the songs were about. So it was one of the things I loved, to go back and why they wrote the song about Andy Kaufman and what to tribute to him. And like you said, he's a performance artist. I think if you look at the wrestling industry these days, like, there's not many heels that don't do it outside the business. They're taking pictures with fans, and they're just on social media being themselves, other than maybe somebody like MGF. But Andy Kaufman was probably the originator, for a Hollywood star to be in that character 24/7, like, never coming off, never taking his foot off the gas, like, as even with people in the industry that thought they knew what he was up to. Like, he just he didn't come out of character, and he pissed everybody off. He pissed so many people off in the industry. They were like, who's this fucking Hollywood person coming in the industry and disrespecting the king? And it was just brilliant the way he did stuff. And it's a shame.
It's almost unimaginable what he did now. Like, it's hard to even put in a modern context, because it's like people are a lot smarter at wrestling now, and there's the kind of personas, people are jumping in and out of characters. But like, back then it must have just been like absolutely mind blowing.
Because like back then it was, nobody was in the business outside of the business. Nobody knew if it was real or not. Like people had their suspicions, about the man in the moon landing. Is it a conspiracy theory? There were same kind of conspiracies about wrestling. Like people weren't sure if it was real or not. So it wasn't until 90s, early 2000s that people really wised up to the business. So back then you can imagine all the people he used to take the piss out of with the accents, the Southern Americans, yeah, man, I'm gonna take can you imagine them, meeting them outside in the parking lot or something, ready to fucking kill them.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting with that as well, of the point you brought up, is most celebrities who come into wrestling now, the element of realism is stripped away as a result of it. Whereas when Andy Kaufman was involved in it, that element of it actually built up the realism even more, because going on Letterman, all that kind of stuff, like it seemed more real when he did it than, say, I don't know, Bad Bunny, who I like, not shitting on Bad Bunny, but like it does, that strips away the realism for me now, whereas back then it seemed to completely add to it.
Is he the first celebrity wrestler? I assume, like, maybe there was other ones, but it definitely seems like
Jimmy Savile,
level.
genuinely. I don't know where I might bring that up, but like
when was Pat Roach as well?
Yeah,
that's 70s, I think. I think that's the 70s.
It was kind of it was actually a done thing for age, for not to that level of celebrity, obviously. Andy Kaufman's a massive star, but I know there used to be big transitions for like kind of washed up, well-known boxers and things like that would become wrestlers and that kind of a thing. But that's within sports, so I suppose it gives it that legitimacy. To have a comedian or performance artist do it is very different.
I think he was
especially like the level of fame he was at when he jumped into wrestling.
He was the first to actually like showcase it on a national scale. Like,
Could you imagine if in the 90s David Schwimmer showed up in in ECW amazing. Or something like?
Oh my gosh!
Well, I don't think that I can imagine Andy Kaufman in the 90s, during the Attitude Era, winning the WCW title, instead of David Arquette.
That is interesting. So can we blame Andy Kaufman for David Arquette winning that championship?
It's all take him out of the Hall of Fame. Boo.
WCW tried it with Jay Leno as well when they tried to bring the wrestlers onto the talk show.
Yeah,
that was also kind of not as good, I suppose.
So I mean, I guess we kind of have a rough kind of idea of who Andy Kaufman is if people aren't aware. Like, but it's funny because just when this happened during the week, I was like saying it even to my dad. I was like, Andy Kaufman, they're putting him in the Wrestling Hall of Fame, and he was like, oh yeah, that's great, Andy Kaufman. Wrestling Hall of Fame. So like, if people aren't aware, his connection with wrestling. I mean, how do we even? I don't even know how we start this, but he was a big wrestling fan growing up. He decided to, correct me if I'm wrong at any point here, guys, he wanted to be considered basically a champion and started challenging women to wrestle him and cutting heelish promos and basically saying any woman that defeats me will get $1,000. And he shows up in Memphis, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay so far. I'm no Dave Meltzer or Jim Cornette. I'm not a great wrestling historian, So he starts basically
just do what they do and just say something very confidently, even if it's wrong.
Plans change. Okay.
But how he actually got to Memphis was Bill Apter, I think.
Well, it started in
that's true.
It started in New York because he met Vince McMahon Sr. in Madison Square Garden on a Saturday night after SNL one time and pitched the idea to Vince McMahon Sr. and he said no because he didn't want people to think wrestling was all full of actors.
Yeah, which brings it back to Luke's kind of point, really, is that a celebrity get involved almost kind of pulls the curtain back a little bit.
Yeah.
But so he goes to Mid-South in Memphis, and he basically starts wrestling all these women, and they put in random guys, legitimately random women, until a woman called
there's
Foxy,
conflicting stories about if they're random women or not. So
that's true as well.
There's one woman in particular who would do it a lot, and she'd always be the random woman. He married her, or at least was in a long-term relationship with her. So chances are she wasn't a random woman. She's gone on record a few different times. One saying they met because they wrestled, and the other time saying that she was always in on the act.
Well, that's what's so frustrating, like trying to follow Andy Kaufman's career, because it feels like you hear both sides of stories multiple times, and you're like, I just don't have any clue what actually happened. But
It's like with Hulk Hogan. Nobody ever knows what actually happened with Hulk
That's
Hogan.
pretty much
either.
it. You're like, I can see he wrestled, so we'll take that, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, he basically kind of gets to the point where there's a wrestler called Foxy, this woman that comes out of the crowd that nearly beats him and gets trained by Jerry Lawler, and essentially things get heated between him and Lawler, and he ends up fighting Jerry Lawler and gets given a pile driver and says that his neck is broken, so much so that he has to get brought away in an ambulance for 3 days. He's in hospital. Apparently
He's in hospital for 3 days.
He's totally fine, by the way, but that committed that he paid for an ambulance to sit in hospital for 3 days. And this thing kind of keeps bubbling over. He's sending all these heel promos to Memphis, and essentially, kind of, I suppose the most noteworthy thing about this is the David Letterman interview, which there's never been a better time to check out this interview, by the way, because Letterman has started putting all his old clips on his own YouTube channel, and this is available in an amazing quality now. But it kind of all boils over to the point that Andy Kaufman, you know, starts shitting on Jerry Lawler. Jerry Lawler gets up and seemingly, legitimately slaps him out of his seat, and Kaufman has an absolute meltdown, swearing and cussing and all this stuff, and that's kind of where the interview ends. And that's why he's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame, I guess.
For me, the best part about that, and what Andy Kaufman was amazing at, is it goes to a break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They leave, and when it comes back, something's happening again.
Yeah.
Andy Kaufman's done this a few times, and I think he got banned from SNL basically for this kind of thing. He was on a sitcom, or not a sitcom, he was on a sketch show at one stage with
Michael Richards.
What's his face from Michael Richards?
Michael Richards, yeah.
Yeah.
Kramer.
And he just goes off on his own, and Michael Richards comes in and actually gives him the cue cards in his hand and stuff like that, because he's just doing his own thing. The best thing about that is he's brought back the next week to apologize, and then in the apology goes off on another rant about it. So he accepts these, okay, there's going to be a break, and if nothing happens after this break, people think it's fake. Whereas if it keeps going, it seems real, it seems chaotic. He's a genius at doing that, and that's
it's the reality of it. Like, because if that actually happened, like if someone had a fucking meltdown in the studio, it wouldn't be like, and our next guest is. It would be like, what do we do, everybody?
And also knowing television and knowing that a TV show will want something like this to happen, will allow something like Jerry Lawler knows wrestling, and you can see in that Vice documentary that he's in. He said, "I didn't think David Letterman was going to put this out." Yeah. Kaufman knew David Letterman's going to put this out.
And they're saying the break wasn't a standard break either. It took them 10 minutes to get everything calmed down before they actually went back live. So there was a 10-minute spell on David Letterman, which was his first season. Like before he was David Letterman, his first season.
What's actually mad about this is this was voted in the top 3 moments in TV history.
Top 3?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's massive. Even now when you search in Letterman, it comes up like pretty quick in the search results.
Yeah.
Like,
is it like 35 million viewers or something on the night as well? Watch this live.
It'll be easy,
That's amazing.
And you might say like we're kind of jumping all over the map here talking about Kaufman, but I don't know, is there any other way to discuss his life?
There is no linear way.
It's just it feels like everything kind of happens at once, and especially when it comes to chronology, that's kind of what they mess with, especially with Man on the Moon anyway. And all the stuff we're mentioning now is in Man on the Moon in a certain regard. So I don't know if we want to jump into I mean, I guess we have to mention REM as well to a certain degree, I suppose, because it is really strange, isn't it, that like there is this song by REM, Man on the Moon obviously is the song, and that's, first of all, that's like the cultural like shorthand. Someone's like who's Andy Kaufman, and I was like, oh, did you hear that Man on the Moon song? Yeah, that's about him. And even still they're like, right, okay, I don't really get that, which you wouldn't if you look at the lyrics. But it's, you know, it's kind of leans into the idea that maybe he did fake his death and all this stuff. And Man on the Moon was a massive song, but even weirder then that like 7 years later they're like, we're going to make a biopic of Andy Kaufman. It's going to be called Man on the Moon. So it's like such a weird kind of tenuous grasp, like to call the movie Man on the Moon, because I don't know.
Yeah, I think there probably was a better title there somewhere. Thank you very much would have been a perfect one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, it's, so I suppose for people watching don't know, that would have been his catchphrase, but he started out doing comedy as his foreign man character, which became Laka on Taxi. He finished doing really bad impressions with his thank you very much, and it was his whole gimmick, I suppose, really.
But I think for me that's kind of emblematic of kind of the problems with this movie, and I'll say kind of right up top, I like this movie. I don't love this movie. Is kind of how I feel about it. But I do
prefer the
feel like-
documentary about the movie to the movie.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I feel the exact same way. Actually,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's that thing where like it really does feel like if you're a fan of Andy Kaufman, it's for you. It doesn't really bring anyone outside the Kaufman world into it. Like I don't feel like I know Andy Kaufman any better from having seen the movie. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I feel like I just saw recreations of the greatest hits. Is my
Yeah.
kind of feeling of it.
But I think it's because there's a lot of people around Andy Kaufman's life that either are giving two versions of every story
Yeah.
to respect the man possibly, or because they don't know themselves.
Don't
That's
know.
the other thing.
Yeah.
I
That's
read
what I was going to say as well. Yeah, I was going
Bob
to say like
Zmuda wrote books about Andy.
Yeah.
Bob Zmuda is Andy's writing partner, best friend, joined at the hip. He's the guy who plays the solicitor for Andy Kaufman in the Jerry Lawler feud and all that kind of stuff. He's always there. He was the referee when he wrestled people.
yeah.
He was he played Tony Clifton an awful lot in real life as well. And his book is sheer bullshit almost. Like it's a cash-in job in one way, but it's also if it is bullshit, it's really sad bullshit because there's a full chapter. I'm sorry, I'm cursing a lot. There's a chapter at the end of it that is begging Andy to come back because he knows he's still
I heard
alive.
that. Yeah.
And it's really, really sad if he thinks he is still alive, or it's really, really good if he knows he's not.
I think, but the stupidest thing, like I think in that biography, he also was like, he's going to come back on the 30th year or whatever. He's like, don't put a firm year in it. Don't ever do that because then you just take away your credibility. But I mean, I think, kind of what you said there kind of leans on what I was going to say, which is that I don't know if you can make a proper movie of Andy Kaufman's life because it is so scattershot. What's real, what's fake.
Yeah,
I don't know if I know what Andy Kaufman, the person, is really like either. Because he's always feels like he's doing an act or performance. So,
and he knew that he'd go on shows pretending to be doing the real version of himself, and he'd do a British accent and things like that, just to really annoy people. Like
there was one part as well where didn't he come on stage when Tony Clifton was there to try and show people?
Yeah. So this is a 1999 film, Man on the Moon, directed by Milos Forman, who also did People versus Larry Flint. I think this is the same writers as the People versus Larry Flint and Ed Wood as well. So yeah, it's people that were really geared towards a biopic in general. Of course, it's probably best known for Jim Carrey's performance, which he got a Golden Globe for. I mean, I guess first, I was going to say, what do you think of Jim Carrey's performance as Andy Kaufman, guys?
It's in places okay, but it's very much two-dimensional impression.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to say impression. Yes,
which I think Jim Carrey knows himself, and it's really evident in the Jim and Andy documentary where he goes as Tony Clifton to watch himself, and he starts. I think Jim Carrey was very free as Tony Clifton, and he starts saying Carrey's ruining Kaufman's legacy. He's playing it too big. He's all this kind of stuff, and I think he really means that. I think he doesn't like his own performance in that.
I actually think this film actually killed Jim Carrey as an actor in general. I think he was never right after it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it messed his head up a bit too.
Well, it was kind of even though it was based around somebody who's a comedian / performance artist, like it was a dramatic role for Jim Carrey. He did the Truman Show, and he's done a few dramatic roles after, like, but it didn't sit with his fans, who were used to his slapstick comedy. And you could see, bits of his slapstick comedy trying to come throughout the movie. Some of his faces he would pull, the stuff that he would pull, like in Batman, or
that was a bit forced, wasn't it? That kind of
him trying to hold back, but he couldn't help himself pulling his faces. But
even I think Andy has this glazed over look in his eyes that Carrey tries to emulate, and he just kind of and it doesn't. I don't know. It makes him look like an idiot or something that he isn't.
It's like it's a very look at how much I can act performance. But again, when you're playing a real life person, it really backfires when a two-dimensional impression is exactly what I would have said. It is very much, and look, I'm not saying I support awards in general, but anytime a kind of movie wins a Golden Globe and it doesn't win an Oscar, normally that's an indication of like, the movie wants an award, so they gave it an award. Possibly purchased. But I mean, look, I think that like it's a film where if you don't talk about the performance, there's not as much to talk about. Like, and we have to talk like the Jim and Andy documentary. Wow, it's. I don't know how I saw this and I don't know how I feel about Jim Carrey after seeing that documentary because he comes off like the most pretentious philosopher, like just 1 year philosophy in college prick, you know.
I allowed Andy Kaufman into my body, and shut up.
Where he's like,
the whole thing with him at the bag and just treating people horribly. It was just
to quote what they say nowadays, like no one who's a method actor ever seems to be a method actor of someone who's nice. You know, he just became an asshole first of all, and then he was just like, what really annoys me anytime he says like he did something wrong, he was like, well. He doesn't say like, "Oh, I did this" or "Jim did this." He's like, "Well, Andy felt." It's like, "Oh, really? Andy wanted to be the dickhead to Jerry Lawler, not you, not Jim Carrey, the actor."
No accountability.
I'm glad Andy came back from the dead to be a dick to Jerry Lawler, which he wasn't in real life. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's key to like people not understanding who Andy Kaufman was, because probably in Jim Carrey's head, he was like method acting. He refused to be called Jim Carrey throughout the whole film, you know, and he thought Andy Kaufman was this way. You know, that's his perception of who Andy Kaufman was, so he decided to treat people the way he thought Andy Kaufman treated people, which made
I have a hot take on this, right? And here it is. Jim got the part, didn't think he was able to do it, and this was his get out of jail free clause. That's my hot take on that. Also, secondly, right, I had an acting teacher once who asked a question in class, and he said, if you really think you're the character who you're playing, say you're playing a murderer, and you're sitting in that room and you really think when you're on stage that you are that murderer and you're going to kill somebody, what's that? And everyone put up their hands and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, method acting, Adler technique, all this kind of stuff and going on like that. And he went, no. And someone went, what's the answer? And he went, mental illness.
He's not wrong, yeah. I was going to say,
you're
not
delusional.
acting anyway.
Yeah, it's not acting. Like you're going crazy if you actually
like
think that.
On the method acting thing, there's like, and I definitely recommend, like, if you go out of your way and watch Man of the Moon, especially so many people are going to check it out now with him going to Hall of Fame, watch The Great Beyond afterwards, because there's just for this one moment, it's very early on. Milos Forman is like talking to Jim Carrey. He's like, "Oh, you know, Jim, you know, we do this," and all of a sudden, Jim's like, he's like, "Oh no, I'm Andy." He's like, "Call me Andy." Blah, blah, blah. And there's one shot, if you look at the background, and it's Paul Giamatti, and he's just like looking like it's a deer in the headlights moment. He's like, "Oh no, the whole film is going to be like this." And the best thing about all this footage is like they always go to like they talk away to actors every now and then, and you know the actors are always trying to do the soft sell. Like they're just kind of like, "Oh yeah, it's like he's here. It's interesting." You're like they don't want to be like it's shit, but they're also like, "Oh god, this is really bad. This is awkward."
I think it made it worse that Danny DeVito encouraged it.
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh, it's just like having Andy here." It's like, is it?
But I can't, like, the amount of cringe of like, and I know that I'm sure there was some therapy here and it helped, like, but it's so cringy to go up to his family and be like, "Yeah, it's me, Andy." I'm like,
yeah, that's
yeah.
That to me is along the same level as mediums scamming people out of money.
Yes,
yeah. What did they get right in the film though? Look, you're the expert here. You know Andy probably better than all of us. But what did they get right in the film that made it watchable?
I think what they got right about him is his legacy, and that's the only thing that I can really say about it. In that this chaotic person, this I suppose free spirit who didn't want to be seen as any one thing and wanted to, above all, to use a wrestling term, keep kayfabe in his performance, is what they got right. And that lasting legacy of what was real, what wasn't, and all that kind of stuff, that is very much what they got right. I think they got the vibe of the chaos right, although it is a little bit cleaned up, I think, because oddly enough, while trying not to make Andy Kaufman look like an asshole, they made Jim Carrey look like an asshole. Yeah. But they really tried to clean up that Andy isn't an asshole, but he wanted to be. He purposely was going out of his way to be an asshole. It's okay to then say, this guy's an asshole, you know, because he was doing that. I don't think he was, based on what his family and his friends all say. I don't think he was, but this was very much a character. But I think they did get that right.
There was a few people crying and everything in the documentary because he was just so into it.
Yeah, that was his brother and sister, I think.
Yeah, it was, I think. It's like the movie itself is it's very strange though. Like even going from like they had the cast of Taxi and they brought back everyone, and then Danny DeVito was there, but Danny DeVito was playing a different character, and then they have other real life people like Jerry Lawler plays Jerry Lawler.
Yeah, that's really
and
odd.
Dave Letterman plays David Letterman, but it's David Letterman now as opposed to David Letterman. It's like a very anachronistic kind of weird film, and I understand why. Like, but
why is Danny DeVito not Danny DeVito then?
Well, he said what Danny DeVito said. He said to cut his character from Taxi out of the movie.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be playing two parts, and he didn't want somebody else playing him. I was like, because everybody else was playing it themselves, so he's like, just don't show. And like
I feel like Milos Forman lost control of this before he even got
in Taxi. He was the best character, besides Andy Kaufman's character.
It's very strange.
So it's strange that he didn't show up in it. But David Letterman as well, like he refused to put on any prosthetic makeup to make him look younger. He said, just leave me as I am. Like,
yeah.
Why not? Like, just fucking put
but that's what I mean, like, about this movie, is that it is so like strange. And even like Michael Richards isn't there. They got Norm Macdonald to play Michael Richards.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, it's like a film where like they're just like jumping from all the things he's done and they're recreating it, but it's also like, and again, I think it's really like what this film did do right is it really added to the kind of the legacy of Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
I don't know how revered Andy Kaufman was, in the late 90s or be it before that or what, but I think it definitely gave it to a new generation and kind of made sure that his impact would go on forever. But like, it does feel like, especially nowadays, like, why would I watch this when I could just watch the actual stuff that happens?
I think so.
Because I don't feel like the character or performance, like I don't feel like I understand Andy Kaufman anymore watching the film than just watching the clips anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be in agreement with you on that one. If I suppose we're saying people will go watch Man in the Moon. If there's anyone watching, just go watch clips. There is he has full stage shows on YouTube. They're there. They're amazing. He brings people for ice cream at the end of it. It's incredible.
Yeah. that was a great scene at the end of it with the rockets and stuff. That was, it wasn't a Christmas movie, but that was a cool scene at the end. Is that legit? Did he actually do that? Is that something he did at one of his last shows?
But he did
the Santa Claus thing or the cookies. I know the cookies bus is real. I don't know about Santa.
Then CM Punk stole that. You know that?
Oh,
CM Punk came back to AEW with the ice cream. That's what he wanted to do. It was Andy Kaufman he was basing it on. Which leads me to wonder what's real about what CM Punk is doing in wrestling right now.
That's weak. That Kaufman's getting in the Hall.
Is he doing full Kaufman?
Oh,
maybe he'll induct him.
Oh my god, I guess. Yeah. I mean, if I've been talking about like celebrities in wrestling, I mean, John Knoxville went as Andy Kaufman pretty much in his WrestleMania match last year as well. So like the kind of legacy is still there,
But Logan Paul playing heel at the moment. It's similar idea.
What would like his legacy, like besides the film, like outside of his career itself, like his impact for the wrestling career, like as early as his time in Memphis and working with Jerry Lawler in Hollywood versus wrestling, like that led into the 80s with WrestleMania. Like surely like Vince McMahon
massively
kicking himself that they didn't do it first.
I think Vince McMahon Jr. saw the mistake his father made and doubled down on it pretty much. Like, not involving Andy Kaufman in New York territory was obviously the wrong decision. Vince Jr. can see that and sees the publicity it gets and goes full on into building something like WrestleMania that always has celebrity involvement and I suppose creates celebrities of his wrestlers rather than having them just be wrestlers.
Yeah. Can you imagine Vince trying to control Andy Kaufman though?
That would have been amazing. I want that Elseworld. I want to see that.
I just want to see them like interact because they're both such weirdos. I just would love to see how that interaction goes. They'd be best friend or mortal enemies. Like,
yeah. I'd love. Do you know what? Someone needs to. If anyone can do an Andy Kaufman impression and a Vince McMahon impression, can we?
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey. Yeah, come on, Jim. Give us Vince versus Jim.
But you know what's going to be so weird? Like, is because he's in the Hall of Fame now. Like, can you imagine the weirdness of like the next WWE game comes out and it's like Andy Kaufman play as Andy Kaufman? I'm like, this is I don't know about that. That feels weird.
Imagine somebody dresses up as Tony Clifton, they induct him or something.
I assume that's going to happen. I assume.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean,
we were talking about that before we recorded. Who's inducted him? It has to be Lawler, yeah.
I was going to say, surely I know Lawler had a stroke recently, but like. Is
did he?
Who else? Oh my god, yeah. But that's actually probably the most fascinating thing if you're going back to The Great Beyond, like is like the whole thing when he does, like, because he really fucking pisses off Lawler, like, and it kind of gets to such a meta point where he's staying in the hospital, and I'm like, that's interesting. it'd be much more interesting if the film it resulted in was interesting. But
Yeah.
like, I don't know. It's an
Apparently,
interesting one. And,
Jim Carrey sent an apology to Jerry Lawler afterwards.
I heard that. Yeah, afterwards he
Yeah.
sent them a note and like some wrestling figures or something. Which is or something. It was something weird wrestling related anyway. I think, but. One of the weird things is that even talking about apologies, like watching The Great Beyond, the only like person he actually kind of was really sorry about was really sorry about REM for not appearing in their music video.
Yeah.
Where he was like, I think there's more people you should probably apologize on that list than REM. Like I'm sure they're fine. Like
They're doing okay.
Where are they now? REM.
Were you like me when piece of pop culture like that REM song came out? The fact that it mentioned wrestling, were you like, yes. I love it.
Yeah.
I always love when rappers mention Ric Flair and stuff like that. It always be a little thrill.
Did you have a look? I haven't watched it. They were in the song. I was researching stuff about it. Basically about Freddie Blassie. They didn't touch it in the film.
Breakfast with Fred Blassie, yeah.
Blassie, like they did it. I haven't actually watched it. It was a spoof on the Dinner with Andre. Not Andre the Giant, like, but it was a spoof on that, like. So
when I was younger, I thought My Dinner with Andre was about Andre the Giant.
I know, yeah. I was like,
Been way better film, yeah.
But
yeah.
Much bigger restaurant.
Yeah, it was cool, but they didn't bring that up. Like, I know they didn't mention that in the film. Like, and I'm not sure have you any of you.
I actually don't think they wanted to involve wrestling as much as generally media. When I was in college, I did a media project on how the media handles wrestling. And when I was in college with you, Phil, and we did I did it on how the media handles wrestling, and they will mention it because they have to in that story, but very often they will just go, this is what we have to say goodbye. Rather than actually focus in on the interesting side of what could be there. I think this is a little bit of that. Any wrestling was what Andy loved. Even when he was doing comedy, he was doing wrestling in his head. It was all kayfabe. It was all playing a heel. It was all that kind of stuff. His sister was interviewed for a podcast I listened to a few years ago, and she said that he was watching Gorgeous George as a child and said he saw that and went, that's what I want to be. He's annoying the crowd, and they're paying to see him annoy the crowd. That's what I want to do. And he did it. And he went and he did it. And they said he used to love being fooled by magicians. He used to love being tricked by people and stuff like that. So that's what he wanted, to fool people and trick people. And it all came from kayfabe, basically, the actual definition of it. That's what he wanted to do. So to not focus on wrestling, I think there's a much more interesting way to tell this story by actually using wrestling as a overlapping story more.
Because it obviously was so influential on him, and we don't really get that kind of,
No, it was just he did this thing with Jerry Lawler. And
it kind of obviously it literally kind of comes out of nowhere. He's like watching wrestling, he's like, I could do that. I suppose I will.
Yeah, I did now.
Like, oh, okay, right. Yeah, but yeah, you're kind of right. Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because like what you're saying is very much what that REM song is about. It's like, if you believe that there's nothing up the sleeve, nothing is cool. Like it's like buying into that stuff is what makes it enjoyable and makes it fun.
Yeah,
and yeah, God, I only wish Andy I wish Andy Kaufman was alive in general, obviously, and maybe he is. But like, just I'd love to know what his reaction would be to being like, yeah, you're going into the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
He would love that.
Yeah.
What would he do as a speech, though?
Oh
my God, that'd be amazing.
Put a heel promo on everybody. He would have to
absolutely.
Maybe wrestle.
Like, what would he think of wrestling now, and how open it is to the backstage, and how can't imagine he'd be a fan.
No,
but I also think he'd find a way to play with it.
But okay, let's see.
In the way that say MJF does, like in the
Who is is there a modern equivalent to an Andy Kaufman in
terms of celebrity or
comedy?
wrestling?
In comedy, celebrity.
Celebrity. Fuck.
The closest person I can think is Eric Andre, but he's not even. He's different altogether.
There's an American comedian called Tim Heidecker.
Yes. Okay. Good one.
He does. He very much. He plays a character on stage a lot and doesn't really wink at the audience for it, to the point where the people he's mocking are his fans now, and it's really strange. Stuart Lee, to an extent, does bits of that where he attacks his audience and stuff, but he's not really a kayfabe kind of guy then, whereas Tim Heidecker kind of...
Frankie Boyle doesn't care either, like...
Yeah.
Frankie Boyle would do that. Jimmy Carr, slightly, like, but...
To offend the audience, yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, like... But
I guess none of them are going to get into wrestling.
No.
Damn.
I don't think with social media it would be a big deal now.
Yeah.
No, that's kind of what I was saying at the start. Like, I mean, like the impact it had then, like the impact it would have now would be like, oh yeah, everyone would be like, it's an angle, it's a celebrity showing up at wrestling.
But
like,
also,
whereas,
it wouldn't be Andy Kaufman showing up in WWE. It would be Andy Kaufman showing up in GCW, or you know what I mean. It wasn't the big company. I know, like Memphis were selling big houses and stuff, but so what celebrity shows up there? It happens all the time, actually. You get these. Your man, what was it in Progress? The guy from Dave Benson showed up in Progress last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mr. Blobby showed up somewhere.
Mr. Blobby showed up.
Yeah. Mr. Robbie is very much the modern equivalent of Andy Kaufman.
Kaufman.
Is what we've established today.
We don't know who's inside that costume.
That's true.
The surrealism right on point, you know.
I want to see Jim Carrey play Mr. Blobby next. Get into character.
I don't want to see that. I want the documentary of him playing Mr. Blobby and losing his fucking
Noel
mind.
Edmonds opening his curtains and Jim Carrey's just out there.
Oh my god. Well, I guess that more or less is it. I suppose we've kind of summed up Andy Kaufman's.
Can I just say I apologize to Andy Kaufman first because I stole his slap spot for no reason once. Were you there, Phil?
It might have been.
And I remember being interviewed for Cork TV or Cork Matters or something like that for CCW.
Was that down in the
me and Lee Callahan being interviewed. We weren't in a feud or anything at the time, but Lee wanted to do something. He was like, we need to do something. And I said, Andy Kaufman. And throughout the interview, Lee would antagonize me and Butch when we were doing the Armstrong thing over and over again. And I, being the hot-headed one, if you would believe it, would start hitting back and it would get more and more aggressive. And then he says something to me and I just stood up and thumped him into the face and walked off. Didn't tell the interviewer it was happening. Didn't tell the camera crews and me and Butch just left, and Lee had to finish the interview after being slapped in the face.
Yeah. And then Lee Callahan faked his death and he may return 20 years down the road. Very
as Mr. Blobby.
As Mr. Blobby. The Hall of Fame 2024. Mr. Blobby.
But yeah, I robbed a lot of stuff from Andy Kaufman.
Thanks for checking this out. I mean, Andy Kaufman, the legacy lives on in wrestling, in comedy, in weirdness. So embrace that outsider nature. I suppose if you enjoy this, of course, like and subscribe. There's loads of more stuff coming on the channel. Luke, what are you up to these days? Tell us something you're doing.
I'm involved in wrestling still, doing commentary for RCW in Cork. We have a show coming up in April, so get to that on Good Friday. I took a pause from it for a few weeks, but I'm back doing 5 Minutes on Friday podcast. It's available on Spotify. Search 5 Minutes on Friday with Luke Barry. Every week I throw up something Andy Kaufman-ish, to be honest. I do fake interviews with people occasionally that I try to trick people into that they're real. I do comedy songs. I do little bits of stand-up that I write here and there. It's an idea to keep me creatively accountable, so I try and write something new every week that's about 5 minutes long. So give it a listen on Spotify if you're into that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Like keep going with that creative spirit. Absolutely. Check out the link in the description. Aside from that, if you want more of me and just me on the Pop Gold Pod channel, I just released my preview of the year and film. You might say, well, Tom, 3 months have gone now, but yeah, trust me, it's still worth it. Most of the films have not come out yet, including all my top 10 films have not come out. So that was handy. Phew. You can also check me out on page 180. I'm going to be talking about Succession as the final season that starts. Sure. Anything coming to the channel that you want to talk about?
Yeah, we have a few interviews coming up before and after WrestleMania that are due to drop. I won't say who they are yet, but you can have a look on the channel. Just subscribe at Irish Wrestling 8. You can follow us TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere else you can find us, Spotify and stuff. So just check out the channel if you're interested. Just like us.
Yeah.
Phil?
Awesome.
Yeah, my big thing now is I'm prepping for a feature film that's going to be filmed in 2 weeks' time. So that should be fun. Comedy horror.
Nice.
So that'll be a good few weeks of filming. So I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
Is that filming in Cork?
Oh yeah, all around the city. Using prosthetics is going to be interesting though. It could either go really, really badly or really, really well. We'll see.
So people of Cork, if you see people in prosthetics running around the street getting chased by whatever, zombies or vampires or werewolves, don't be scared.
Devil, more devil.
It's you're not after taking too much acid. It's just a movie being shot.
Yeah, in and around the city. Yeah, so I look forward.
Yeah.
So I
Seems
look like a serial killer with this
everyone's busy
lighting.
one. A little bit, yeah. It's kind of that's going to be like if you screen cap that, that's going to be like if you ever found out something horrible about Luke, it would be like, who was he really though?
The Phantom.
Dun, 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 dun.
The two sides of Luke Barry. But yeah, I mean, aside from serial killing, it seems like we're all very busy. So be sure to check out that stuff. Aside from that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and thank you very much. Come on,
Nice.
someone can do a better job of that, guys. Come on, someone else do a better job than that than me.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
Not bad.
Everyone has to do one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.